So go live in 3, 4, 2, 1. And not do an intro. 3, 2, 1.
All right.
Hello, hello for all those watching. Looks like we got Bob Cox already commenting. First as always. So yeah, talking with Henry, there's been wars, whether it be Aaron or DOA, and a lot of this has nothing to do with actually bringing harm or bringing down Scientology. Henry actually is kind of quietly and assiduously. So we're going to talk about the death, I believe, of Stacy Moxon and what the actual reality of that death was. Of course, the ostensible, she was a Sea Org member, daughter of famed Scientology attorney Kendrick Moxon, who I've had the great pleasure of meeting. Very friendly guy, obviously being sarcastic. But she is his daughter, was his daughter, Squirrel, which even the talk of squirrel is, maybe I'll ask Henry about that. But she was chasing a squirrel and found herself in a vault apparently and got electrocuted. And this was at, I forget what it's called, like the Blessing or something, or a different type of building. So I guess yeah, Henry, what have you been doing? And kind of, you want to take the story from there, and what got you interested in kind of uh, really kind of trying to FOIA or threaten actual lawsuits against people to get this info out?
Yeah, so basically the suit itself came out of a records request I did for the investigative files that the Riverside County Sheriff's Department responded to over in their big location known as Gold Base, right in the middle of San Jacinto and Hemet, which is, if you've ever driven by there, it's literally in the middle of
Okay, so
nowhere.
this is all in gold face then.
Yeah, it's where they have their giant RPF slave torture compound. Everybody that tries to leave that has some sort of ideology or ideation of wanting to escape and what they call as blow, they send them there to basically enslave them and make sure that they don't rat out. So that's where she was last known. Her whereabouts were that the official narrative, anyway, is that she was a groundskeeper, had worked as one for quite a bit, and while doing her routine groundskeeping tasks, was seeing herself in a tragic accident of sorts, falling on a live 7,200 volt electric wire, and that ultimately led to her untimely death. And the issue I have is many, but to give people some perspective, first of all, this is a real incident. Stacy is a real human. That did happen where she did die. And the police files on her death are real. And the response I got from the sheriff's department is that that there are no such files pertaining to her death, that basically this is some non-existent incident. But also we'll give you the names of the deputies that responded to the very same incident that you're talking about. And so that's the whole premise and full picture that people need to understand as to what happened with this lawsuit. And still to this day, what I believe to be very shady dealings with how that investigation, entire situation were handled. So
Interesting. So yeah, it was, so she had some reason, I believe, to experience some sort of stress because she was married and got separated from her husband. Her husband remains in LA, and she put in a request simply to see her husband, simply to visit. She got that request denied. And there's a good story that Claire Headley had, and she talks about the Stacy situation. And Claire felt that had Stacy been in LA to see her husband, she would have remained there. I don't know if she would have blown from Scientology or would have been transferred. So there's a lot of reason to feel like a it was ruled a suicide, that it could very well be suicide over an accidental death. So what do you feel was, first off, what do you feel complete in this police report? They ruled an accidental death. Was there an autopsy? Was their wounds consistent with an accidental death? So yeah, what's in that initial police report that seems interesting to you?
So there was an investigation, and they did rule it as an accidental death. Before even getting to the files, the problem I have is we're talking about a location that is very well known from countless direct firsthand experiences of testimony that people actually lived, grew up in for a very long time, also knew Stacy and had escaped. And all of them, these people do not know each other and have the same story, which is this is a torture compound, that we are forced to stay there. It is practically impossible to leave. When we do try to leave, we are, against our will, brought back. And forced to undergo further torture to reconcile the fact that we try to exert our free will and leave the compound. And so that's the pretext to all of this. And so regardless of whether this woman
What
actually,
was specific torture? Did they talk about that or no?
this is where the
Just to
RPF,
sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
but
this is where the RPF is held.
oh, right, okay, this is where RPF was.
So we
Wow,
know
okay, so
from,
that so
yeah,
physical labor.
right. And Stacy also from childhood has went into this. We also know from people that actually personally grew up with Stacy what her life was like. One of those people that's still alive today is Laura Anderson. She has firsthand direct knowledge of Stacy, of Stacy's family, and she knows intimately what Stacy's life was like, and specifically at Gold Base, which is where the death occurred. And so all of that preponderance of evidence, regardless of what they said findings in the situation to be, she very well might have had strong ideations of wanting to take her life. That is irrelevant because you have to look at what led somebody to that point. As somebody that is a prosecutor, that is competent, that is what every murder case is based off of. What actually resulted in leading up to the incident itself, because the incident itself really is not all that incidental. It's what led up to it. And so based off everything I've read from the Headley's video interviews, from the book that the Headleys wrote, to testimony I've heard from Nora, to testimony I've heard from Laura, conversations I've had with them, it all leads me that there was many people, many factors leading up to this person inevitably losing their life as a direct result of their influence over her. And absolutely, in my belief, based on all this information, based on what I read on the police files handed over, there is probable cause enough for this to be heard by a jury rather than just be admonished under bureaucratic red tape. Let a jury hear it and let's see what they say about all this evidence and what they have to say. That, frankly, is what a competent prosecutor and DA should be doing. And so that's my take on the whole situation.
So what was in that initial police report? What was the explanation? And was there any suggestion of follow-up? Or
So
what
they,
were I read it, you probably can't remember word for word, but in general, what was kind of went down?
So they talk about who responded. They talk about getting a call, and they talk about the people that were interviewed at the base. The name of the person who actually made the initial call of service to the deputies is redacted. But they talk about a coroner's report being conducted on the body. And I can tell you from the witnesses that they obtained on the police report from the deputies who responded to the Scientologist, there's countless other examples that have shown that people who are in Scientology that are responsible for overseeing people like Stacy to make sure that they don't, leave, those people have a clear pattern and practice of being completely disingenuous, and the only way to really get at the bottom of what they're saying is to compel them on the witness stand, and you just rigorously go through and you cross-examine each and every one of them. Gene Allard is a great recent example of this, where actually at the Los Angeles Board of Neighborhood Commissioners, the guy that's the sitting president of that commission, he was actually a deputy DA at the time that Gene Allard sued Scientology for false imprisonment, and he won. And that guy, who then, Len Schaefer, who made testimony on that case, testified that during his investigation and testimony, cross-examination of Scientologists, he made it very clear that they had all severe inconsistencies, that they were some of the worst people he's ever had this pleasure of taking testimony from, and they had such a ingrained pattern and training to lie, and none of their stories added up. And so he ruled that they were just not credible witnesses. And so to take entirely just their testimony is, in and of itself, in my opinion, grave injustice, and shows that really, again, this should be heard by a jury and let them determine if they're innocent, then they're innocent, and if they're not, then issue the appropriate commission and sentencing.
What was the coroner's report conclusion?
That it was damages to the body, that they were basically sort of almost what you would expect of somebody touching a live wire. But the problem is, my background is in power system, and when you touch a live wire that has that much high amperage going through it, basically what happens to you, to not get gruesome, is imagine the stories you hear about people going into space where you have cold boiling, where the opposite of when you heat up a pot of water, you have that happens to your internals, and it's basically like gel on the inside. I did not see that as a consistent report for somebody who touched that high level of power on what they're deeming to be a live wire. It just doesn't make sense. Have you ever seen those YouTube videos of where those people that turn on a breaker at an industrial plant, they grab a lever and there's a guy with a rubber hook on the other end and wait and see if they get shocked to pull them away from it? I did not see that was the case in what they had indicated happened to her body, as what I would expect somebody on safe reports I've seen of somebody touching that high level of power and amperage on a live wire. It just doesn't add up in my opinion. So that, as well as the lies that the sheriff's department said about the reports not existing, but then they hand over the very same records that I've posted and shared, meaning those records exist. The inconsistencies with testimony, the inconsistency of what...
You had to sue them, essentially, or threaten to sue to get that record open. When previously they said didn't exist.
I had to sue, yeah. The excuses they gave me for when people file a public records request, okay, that is a legal document, even if you don't take them to court, okay? And so that is one of the exhibits I filed. And some of the arguments I was making. And so they were literally issuing some most irrelevant... I'll give you one specific one, okay? They said the files are not cleared for release because they're exempt under Senate Bill 1421. in regular language, Senate Bill 1421 California only has to do with officer-involved shooting. When a cop draws a gun or there's another gun that goes off at the scene of an incident, that Senate bill literally establishes a floor of what records to release at a minimum. It does not say that files are exempt from release. It tells you actually the opposite. It says there's a minimum amount of files you have to release. And some of that involves the names of the deputies and the types of weapons that are suspected and location and time. Okay? It has nothing to do with this case. This was not at all a shooting incident. That was one of the many examples that they use as an exemption. And I told them, first of all, this has nothing
to do with... So the initial response, we can't get this to you because there's an exemption.
Not only an exemption, that was one of the exemptions, where they literally said, because they were saying, because it's not a officer-involved shooting, Senate Bill 1421 tells us that was it to you. And in fact, that's literally not at all. SB 1421 says it's not at all relevant. They literally pulled it out of their ass, and that's not the first time they did this whole back and forth, because I challenged them on it, and I told them that you're outright wrong. This is completely irrelevant. And after about 5 times of them doing this, where other exemptions, they were talking about how they made up and said, well, I'm requesting specific private personnel files of specific deputies on their disciplinary records. And I'm like, did you read what I asked for? I never asked for any disciplinary records. I literally am asking about whether these deputies have been punished before and what the results were. And so that was another example of the obstruction and contempt. And then another exemption they threw out was lying again, saying that I'm requesting private health records. And I told them I literally do not want any sort of private health records. I don't want to know if she was diagnosed with a specific medical condition for the death. I don't need to know if she saw a chiropractor. That has nothing to do with this, and you are also not an entity that is covered by any of these exemptions. You're not her primary care doctor, okay? That's not at all in your purview. And so why you even dare to pull that out of thin air adds a further to this list of contempt, this list of shady tactics. And yeah, I mean, it was only through suing them that I could compel them to hand over the records.
I mean, is it unusual, to get stonewalled like this from a case that's 25 years old and wondering if that's a typical response or not?
No, they will tell you that even the FBI, who I've done public record requests to, okay, what the FBI does is they will tell you we just need some time, and then they'll give you the records and they will redact portions. That's totally normal. Even if they redact too much, you can fight them on that. But even they release files. The Sheriff's Department outright said they don't exist. They didn't just say that they were exempt. They did 2 things at the same time. It was very stupid of them. They said the records exist and they're exempt. And then they also simultaneously said these records don't exist. And so which one is it? How can you give me the names of the deputies of the specific incident I'm talking about, which can only come from these same files that you're saying don't exist? When in fact those files do exist. A police report contains the names of deputies, and they gave me those names of deputies. Same with the dispatch log. They said they did it twice to themselves. They said records exist, but they're exempt, and then records don't exist, so we're not releasing. So it's, I mean, you can't make this up, but they do this because always scare people out of getting records, because they're betting only that somebody will not prosecute and sue you. And the other thing they do is what they happen in this case, which is if an agency is really shady, they will actually change the name that the system of record they have that stores all the records. They will change the name under which that software system saves them as. So in Stacy's example, they misspelled her last name, okay, her legal government-issued last name.
It's hard for you to get because of the spelling. I mean, you got to realize somebody realized there's a mess up in spelling, it wouldn't have been accessible.
And the thing is, I want to be clear on that language, because it wasn't a mess up. This is very well-known tactic that police agencies and other government agencies do this to screw with people. They will deliberately change the spelling of the name so that when anybody makes a request, they say, well, that name comes up as your results. And the fascinating thing is, these guys are morons, and I structured my request in this fashion to catch them in a sect. I asked them for the different parts to these files at different stages. So they gave me the name.
Multiple parts.
Right. They gave me the name of the cops for that specific date, which tells me they know exactly who the hell I'm talking about. They know exactly the date. They know exactly the name of the person. And if there's even a remote possibility that, say, it was a genuine mistake, that they messed up her spelling of the name, they could rectify that and say, we're sorry, it seems like we made a genuine typo when we were searching our database for her name. But that's not what they did. They gave me the names of those deputies, and then immediately went into, oh shit, he caught us in a lie. Let's throw out exemption after exemption after lie to cover a previous lie, to cover our ass, because oh shit, he's caught us. And that was their fundamental flaw. That's where they royally fucked up. And so that ultimately led to the settlement where they agreed to hand over the files and made a sworn declaration. Because open court, if they didn't do this, they would be admitting, should the competent prosecutor at some point open up a murder investigation, they would basically be admitting, oh shit, I knew what was going on, I had part in it, and there's a fucking court case of a record in the hands of the public that would show my collusion in hiding this information. And so that was the only action they could do. To settle, release records, admit they fucked up, and then leave it at that. And so that's exactly what happened.
Police report, especially coroner's report. You say, the news to me is an interesting part too, that not only is it firmly believed that Stacy took her own life, now I'm getting the information, it doesn't seem like she took her own life by purposely placing herself into that electrical vault. That methodology could have been completely different. So first, just to the coroner at least say, did the coroner make a conclusion one way or the other as to whether the injuries in that vault, he confirmed that there are those type of injuries intentionally or accidental? Does the coroner say anything about that? And what else is in the police report that stood out that might point as a reason as to why they want it covered?
So I can tell you, and on the files, I actually tell that I've worked on electrical vaults before. First of all, they're saying this vault in particular, the way it works is when you You gotta understand this is a desert, and so all they have when they say a vault is the following: you have empty, ugly desert land, and then you have a hole dug up with cement that is covering up the electronics housing. Usually, it's a substation that you'll cover that will contain transformers, that will contain switch gear, that will contain relays. Okay, and this vault is always covered by metal doors. In this case, they had a steel manhole cover. So you have to physically go with the intent, open it up, get inside, have it pre-planned that you're going to do this. That it's so many steps involved that you got to realize at some point, first of all, the vast majority of the people, even the ones that have suicidal ideations, we know from countless psychological studies. In fact, a lot of people in your chat are also nurses that can talk to this too. And from studies we know over at the what is it, the Bridge of California, where people regret jumping off of that survive afterwards. All of them, pretty much all survivors, all deeply regret and had no intent of doing it, and they would never do it again. In this case, it's so much more involved. It just doesn't add up to you. And so what they're saying is she went to enter the vault, fell off a ladder, touched the live wire by the two electrical transformers, and that's how she died. Severely burned. It just does not add up to me.
Based off witnesses of what, 3 or 4 people, the witness testimony?
That's what I'm basing off of. They talk about in the report, the contact.
I think you froze.
They talked about how they contacted California, which is the utilities provider, conducted a safety check of the transformers, put a voltmeter to verify whether there was electrical current runoff onto the manhole cover, into the vault, right? Where you can imagine if something is energized, if you touch even the outer shell, it could possibly have been. So there was also a coroner in California, OSHA respondent, and all of these people that they did interview with, those detail org members that run the security for the personnel. I mean, the problem I have, again, is that...
So they tested out to see if it's physically possible, I presume, essentially.
Yes, so what they did is basically have somebody put on an electrical shock prevention suit and head over to the vault where smoke is coming from, spray a extinguishing agent to make sure that if there's any runoff, and then that it would be safe to enter, and so on and so forth. I get that. I understand that. They asked about the maintenance of the vault itself, and they told them, the maintenance was recently done about 3 weeks ago, which is again bizarre because if there's maintenance done on a vault less than 3 weeks ago, first of all, that majority of electrical vaults, no fucking reason I have ever have any reason to go in there. Stacy Moxon is not a trained control systems engineer that she could have a single fucking clue on what switchgear or relays, whatever the fuck else she's looking at. Why would a regular ass layperson be inside of a goddamn electrical vault? Makes no sense.
Right.
Okay? It absolutely makes no sense. So I understand what they're documenting, what they see. There is no work done.
Well, they want bias confirmation, right? I mean, they're starting from the premise that it definitely happened.
Right.
And they didn't investigate if there was any. If they did something prosecutable, if they didn't ask enough questions to the right sources, could you look at disciplinary action or something like that?
So the reason why, in my opinion, it didn't go forward is because anytime there's a victim, the prosecutors and the police always go to the family and ask the family, what do you want done? That's how it works. The way prosecution works is you look at if the victim is around, talk to the victim. If the victim is no longer with us, you talk to the victim's remaining surviving family and what they want to do. And the way prosecutions work is if you don't have a victim, you don't have a case. And if the family doesn't want to push charges or an investigation, then they say, well, there's not enough interest. So to hell with it. We'll just leave it as it is, and here's our report. So that's the very practical and actual reason for why that happens all the time. And in fact, this is exactly how it works with ZDT in this community, where you'd be surprised. First of all, not many victims actually come forward. That's a fact. Okay. And from public records I've seen, a lot of people do not come forward, especially with somebody like ZDT. And that's a problem because then, in the eyes of law enforcement, if you have no victim that comes forward with a report, then there is nothing to prosecute. And most importantly, if that victim doesn't push for added charges for a higher level of prosecution, then they say, well, even if there's clearly factors that show probable cause for them to be prosecuted on heavier charges, if the victims aren't pushing it, then we have no case. So therefore, we're not going to go down that route. And that's why I've been urging people who have been victims, if they actually want to do something about a scenario, you have to come together as a unified voice, put aside your politics, and realize that in order to affect change in the long term, you have to come and agree on a unifying point and hold accountable and bring to justice perpetrators and violators. Otherwise, you cannot simply expect for anybody else to do the work or the system to handle that work for you. It's just not how it works. And so for some people, that's a rude awakening, but that's just the cold, hard truth of how it is.
Scary. I mean, that's the thing. It's I mean, you're the first person to show any interest with. I mean, a lot of other people have showed interest in Stacy Moxon's death, but you're one of the first people to do legal maneuvers to actually try to uncover some things. And I guess one question would be, I mean, I asked this before, but I asked a lot of questions. So Amy was curious in the chat about the autopsy report. You again mentioned the injuries, but they didn't say one way or the other if it was suicide or not suicide. And then the last question is, yes, you need usually a parent to advocate on behalf of the victim or something like that. But would there be an angle to this where you could investigate either Kendrick Moxon or somebody on the Gold's Base staff for either perhaps second degree murder, negligible homicide, or manslaughter?
Those are all options, right? Those are 100% in the purview of prosecutors. You got to understand that that is
And there's no limit, right?
correct. There's no limit to murder. The degree to which is not
Right, no time limit, right?
right. That's not becoming to me or you to prosecute on the specific charges. What we as non-parties to this, our function is really to show that there is very gray area and push for accountability. We did the work. The files are here. Okay. There is clear and convincing testimony, in my opinion, that shows a totally different narrative from what police files indicate. And that, in and of itself, is sufficient enough to take this on and actually put before a jury, right? What we're saying is don't let this simply be handled administratively. This should not be handled administratively. Put it in front of a
A
jury.
call for an investigation, essentially.
Yeah, put it in front of a jury. Let them say what the fate is, right? Get it out of the hands of bureaucrats and let a jury, regular people, take a look at the totality of circumstances and evidence, the testimony of people that have escaped that environment, and let them make a determination. That's a scary thing for a lot of people because vast majority of the time, regular lay people look at situations like this and reasonably come to a conclusion that, you know what, there's something here and we really need to hear the whole story. And that is a
Well,
problem.
yeah, it's just like with the situations with a lot of the therapeutic boarding schools, the so-called wilderness therapy programs. People have been conditions that have led to death, and that death could be accidental, and that on even if everything were accurate, that alone is something worth following up. Uh, or if the conditions exacerbated somebody enough to take their own life, or death could be caused in a mysterious circumstance. So my question is, if there was, you took step one, and step one is going through the files, seeing who's to now. You might actually be the catalyst to get a court hearing for this. Who would you predict would you see on this stand? Would it be Kendrick Moxon? Would it be the police officers who face justice? Would it be some very specific security guard with Stacy Moxon at the Gold Base? Would it be all of them? I'm curious because you have such an expertise on kind of what players end up where in a court case. So if it's not too soon to know that.
I think situations like this are inherently complex. And the fact of the matter is, as to who has specific percentage of liability can only be to that there is significant grounds for probable cause based on the
Right.
conditions of that environment, what Stacy personally went through, and survivors as well as her family, to give rise enough to show that this really should be heard in a jury of our peers rather than be buried under administrative red tape. And so, whoever actually led or influenced her to do those acts that
Right. You
day,
subpoena people.
right, subpoena them, get them on an open record, let the public see what happened, and let them determine what the fate of these people are rather than continue to let it be buried. It is not a coincidence for a police agency to hide and go to the extents it did to bury a simple records request, a very simple one. Okay, even LAPD, as much of a pain in the ass they are, they will release files like this with redactions. They don't hold it entirely. They release files with redactions, and that is normal, routine, day-to-day tasks that they do, which is fine, right? I'm fine if they withheld stuff and by redaction, but they said no, and I was specific in how I worded it. I asked them even for the incident ID of the report, which would show me nothing, right? An incident ID is completely useless. It's a randomly generated digit that has no bearing on anything unless you specifically work for that agency and specifically have access to that software system. Otherwise, it means nothing. They would not even give me that. And that's a common tactic to catch law enforcement agencies where if they're denying you something so trivial and they're not even, they could have blacked out the entire file and just gave me that incident ID, put everything else redacted, black it all out, and just give me that. But they wouldn't even give me that. Okay? There's a rhyme and a reason for doing this. And that's the that's the thing that I'm basing all of my conclusions on. That's the reasoning that I'm using. And so again, that's the actual determination that I'm making, that there's enough shady tactics for there to be probable cause for an investigation and for a jury to hear. Let the grand jury hear all this information and let them come to a conclusion on who they're going to indict and let them hear it rather than have it be buried under administrative paperwork. This is a problem. We know that testimony given by Scientologists on high profile situations like this are fundamentally, they don't hold water. Okay. We have various deputy DAs and DAs literally saying that on record their testimony doesn't hold water. And so that in and of itself is a problem because the files themselves are literally taking testimony from these same people to use as their basis of conclusion. And so the reasoning does not add up there. You have, at the same period of time, people who were protesting outside and were getting arrested for speaking out about people who are trapped and enslaved in that compound, as well as people who were discovered at the county government agency itself to actually be on the take of Scientology. One of those people was a Riverside County Board of Supervisors member who had received direct political donations and actually enacted an ordinance to make it illegal to protest within a couple hundred feet of the specific gold-based site. And so that series of evidence shows you that there is enough here, again, for a probable cause to be met. Let a grand jury hear it and let them determine what the fate of these people are, rather than bury it under administrative paperwork, rather than bury it under any sort of other legalese or other obstructions. And my interest in all this, I think people, I have no real vested interest in Scientology. For me, Scientology is nothing more than a medium to catching government officials doing criminal shit. And this is a perfect example. I caught the Riverside County Sheriffs, which is who my real interest is, doing some highly suspect shit, and I caught them doing it repeatedly, so much so that I sued them over that activity, and there's an open public record now of them admitting in so many different ways that they hid this information and knew what they were doing. And so that's always been my main focus. Even when I was prosecuted in LA, I knew that I would be prosecuted, right? I knew that that is a very high probability of happening. I didn't really have a problem with that. The problem I had is this was something so stupid that any competent prosecutor would not take this on because it ties them now to the agency. It ties them to this criminal activity. And so that was my whole
Yeah.
interest, to
Well,
link the current city attorney, right? Because we know from other previous years that Bass is a Scientologist and she's on the take. But the direct link
you
to
think she's straight up, wait, hold on. You think she's straight up Scientologist.
You do not get invited to speak at those private commencement
Because
events unless you have a direct affiliation to, I guarantee you, she probably took at least one
wow,
Scientology course. You don't get to speak at those events unless you do. And me,
wild. I had no idea. Her answer was she had no idea who they were. Maybe she had a friend who had money who told her, like, hey, speak at my cool Scientology opening. And she's like, oh, okay. I didn't know anything about it.
that
Hashtag Caruso was right.
Yeah, Caruso was right. Caruso's a moron, first of all, an absolute incompetent moron, and
I'm
Mejia
sure.
should win because Mejia is the only honest politician in all of LA. But besides that point, she did know because she had to have known because the only thing Bass deals in is land deals. And one of the biggest landowners in all of LA County is Scientology. They own so much goddamn property, it's ridiculous. And so she 100% knew who they were. And that is the
Wow.
point that I wanted to make with tying a prosecutor, the city attorney, to Scientology. And I think I shared it with you. I just haven't uploaded it to YouTube yet. But I actually recorded Heidi, the Los Angeles city attorney. I went to a public event. She didn't know what my face looked like, but she knew my case and she knew who I was. And so I went to the Sherman Oaks Homeowner Association and I interviewed her about my case. And I asked her very plainly, do you know about this Henry guy who was getting prosecuted over this case involving some planners? And that Audit LA has been talking about these planners and the netting that they've been putting out. And she did it anyway, as a favor. And so that is beautiful because you have an active case, which, first of all, she's not supposed to talk about active case
I
to
saw that.
anybody with. Nobody, not the least of which the guy who is the defendant in the case and who has a lawyer representing him. And so we have that now on a record. And this is great because this is what you want to get as a government official. And so the outcome of all the donations that people gave me for that pain in the ass that I went through for almost a year is I got deep, intimate knowledge of exactly how the attorney's office works. Of her admitting that she prosecuted this maliciously and vindictively, and because of the support from people like you guys, we did it at zero cost. I was able to get all my lawyer fees paid off for, which is fantastic, and that was the whole reason why I even showed up in the encampment. I knew that somebody who has no social media following like me, and much of my personality, I don't even really care much about the social media space. I needed to
Well,
do
good
a,
folly. Don't say
a big enough risk to pretend and kind of look stupid for people to buy into enough drama to help support and finance. And then at the end of that, we have the show a city attorney prosecuting people record on a recording admitting that she's doing it as a political favor. And that's a great win in my eyes. I mean,
well, so can I ask you? So I'd like to compare and contrast, if I may. And I want to get back to the Stacy Moxon thing as well. But oh, pardon me. He showed up. He continued being confronted. Do you think they would have given you a much more minor version of the charge, or do you think this dude like made it 10,000 times?
oh, I think you broke up. I don't know if you can hear me. Say that last part again. I think you broke up. Do you think
No, now I can hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me? Or is it still breaking up?
It is still breaking
All
up.
right, there. Is that
You're
better?
breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, is that
Now
better
you're
now?
right. Yes, I can hear you better. You're a little pixelated, but that's all right.
All right. So I think you were saying about Aaron's case and whether he has made it worse and if it's similar to my case. Is that right?
Yes, if you behaved the same way that he yeah, if you behaved the same way that he behaved, would you have had your bail revoked, and would you have gotten the minimization of the charge that you ended up, it was ultimately a violation? Would those results have been the same had you behaved similarly to Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I knew that going to Blue was moronic to do that 24/7. It's utterly stupid, okay? There's literally nothing to show there. And you look like a worse than a creep the Scientology is by going in there and just aimlessly wandering with your phone, zooming in on their rooms, zooming in on the dumpster bins, and there's nothing, okay? It literally does nothing. The best things to
Right.
spot are people that board the buses because there's literally, if you've never seen it, man, I've driven by them several times myself. there's literally like almost 100 people hacking into a goddamn bus. That is interesting, and you get to catch the faces of people that are in the Sea Org,
Sure.
especially ones over by Author
Another one,
Services.
us.
Yeah, where the OSA people are. You get to capture the identities of people, so that's great. But I knew showing up there was moronic. Okay, my whole goal was not to continue showing up there to be moronic. It was to provoke the government enough to see what would they do. Right? Are they actually gonna put themselves in a dire spot and prosecute this or not? And to relate it back to Aaron's case, what he was doing and showing up was actually beautiful. Just showing up there, they had pizza parties. That's fantastic. They were just chilling on the street, literally holding pizza parties, holding a sign, doing absolutely nothing but just chilling on the sidewalk. That is perfect. Like, picture perfect. It's exactly what you want. But he didn't need to do what he did, which was not only escalate it to the point of throwing water back, but stepping and blocking an entrance. You can't block ingress and egress. Okay, you can't. You just can't block that door. And the fact that he has such an egotistical personality, you know, two things can be true at the same time. I truly believe that Aaron is 100% innocent. The charges are utterly stupid, and that he's just
I
being put
agree.
through the ringer. And at the same time, I also believe that he's an absolute egotistical moron that has no business in
I mean, he's
behaving.
found Jesus. He's found Jesus now.
Yeah, that he has no business in being as egotistical and egomaniacal as he is, and it never goes in his favor. And he continues to shoot himself in the foot, and it's utterly moronic. It's one thing to be moronic with a clear plan to catch government officials tied to something. It's another thing where I don't think Aaron is planning any of this. I think truly this is just his day to day, which is full ego mode, and that's all he ever has 24/7 operating in his mind. That's a problem because he's positioned himself not only as a public figure, but as somebody who specifically is there to help people leaving this environment. I have never put myself in that position. I care about what the government does and roasting the crap out of the government, holding them accountable. That's been my thing from day one. I have never made any claim, nor do I ever care to specifically provide support, housing, financial support, emotional support for people leaving this. I have no skin in that game. I know nothing about what that is, and people that are way more qualified than me should be handling that. But Aaron is different because he has staked that claim, and he has repeatedly done so, and that's his entire persona. And to act in this way is forget about what he has done to himself. It's totally unjust. It's totally irresponsible for the people that he's claiming to help, and it does them a great disservice. And he owes it not to himself, but he owes it to those people to be better. Same goes for Jenna Miscavige. Same goes for Natalie, Marilyn Honig, and everybody else that feeds into this entire stupid cesspool that is this drama and over emotional response to things that actually have no significance. People that have no involvement in any of this. I talk to people that are just regular people, you could say, and I've shown them just snippets of some of this, and they're immediately turned off. The regular layperson wants to see how did government fuck up, who did it collude with, and how did they do it. That's all they care about. And the trolling part is just the lead-in for them to see the rest of the shit, which Aaron does very fucking well. Okay, I want to give him his credit for that. He knows a lot of good information, and he knows about the local politics. Just talk about that. Make that a big selling point and just continue hammering it because you can't hammer that enough because it's tied into so much other shit, not just Scientology related, right? You have police accountability that needs to happen where there's no civilian review boards, all sorts of shit. And so none of this stuff helps. It only hurts. And for Aaron's sake, if you want something higher than him to look at, realize that he's doing this as a major disservice, a major insult to the people who want to help. And so and it's just childish, moronic, and they can do better. I mean, they know what they're doing, and I mean, grow up, like, seriously.
So what do you think's going to happen in his case? Do you think they'll offer him? Like, first, what do you think is going to happen? Yeah, I think it's like January 14th is his next hearing. What do you think's going to happen?
If I was Aaron, frankly, if I was Aaron, I would just go and move for speedy trial. I would just say enough of this. This is stupid. Move for speedy trial because his case is
Right, he
pretty
already spent time
straightforward.
in jail and stuff.
Yeah, he spent time in
Yeah.
jail. When a jury, you got to remember, because the way they pick a jury is from the county. It's not just from the city of Clearwater. Regular people, first of all,
Right.
the vast majority of the public utterly despises government corruption, and even the thing they despise even more is Scientology. Regular people hate Scientology, okay? They hate it to the bone. They can't stand it. They want it out of America. and the jury of regular people will see that. They'll see that this is a stupid case, that this man was put through the ringer. Regardless of what you think about his ego, it doesn't matter. The charges are totally stupid, and so let him be free. Let him continue to support his family and get back to spending quality fatherly time with his children and move on with his life. That's what I think would be the best approach for him. Just move for a speedy trial, get it over with. I mean, Bob Minton got into similar bullshit before, where he swatted his
Sure.
hand at a
Yep.
guy while he was on the phone who happened to be a Scientologist who was badgering him. Ultimately got charged for it, and he did the same thing. Move for a speedy trial. Within 5 minutes of the jury deliberating, they came to a not guilty verdict, and that was it. So, I mean, same thing for Aaron's case. This is not what people. It doesn't work how people think it does. Or this case is not going to set some sort of precedent or have some constitutional, ripple of where First Amendment and all these other. It doesn't work that way. Okay, so it just doesn't. All that happened to Aaron is that the tale as old as time. A corrupt prosecutor put him through the ringer and wanted to see if he would quit and self-implode. And that's all it is. It's really nothing more than that.
What do you think's gonna happen with DOA?
The problem with both of these guys is that they have such an ego on them. They have such an
Yeah.
ego, and their ego is their number one enemy. And the problem is kind of twofold. LA, first and foremost, LA is so bombarded with cases. On average, at just the misdemeanor and felony state charges, each of those judges see about 700 cases a year, minimum. Okay, each of those judges individually see a minimum of about 700 cases. They don't care about hearing some of the deeper ins and outs that otherwise in other smaller cities maybe you could have gotten some sort of sympathy for. And so that is working
Right.
very heavily against them. The other thing working very heavily against them is ego. And that's the real problem, because that ego is going to allow things to be entered on the record that have nothing to do with what he's going through. And my problem with it is, from my lens at government accountability, when you look at what the prosecutor is prosecuting with, why for the love of God, are we not seeing those same charges on ZDT? Why are we not seeing felony charges, despite myself, the Miner's family, Mindy, Nora, Laura, Liz Gale, Liz Ferris, Aaron and his family and his children, Natalie, and countless other people that have been victimized by this guy, clearly on video. Why is he not being charged with felonies? This guy distributed CSAM. For those of you that don't know what that acronym is, go ahead and look it up. He had a Discord server where him and his co-conspirators were literally distributing CSAM. Okay? That Discord server has not made it to pleadings. He was distributing CSAM. That in and of itself.
Right.
Let's not even take into account the repeat violations of multiple restraining orders. Okay? That in of itself should have landed him at least one count of felony charge. And it hasn't. And so that's my problem with this entire thing, of where we have a guy who has a big ego, and frankly does deserve some sort of judicial.
Yeah. What does he say, by the way?
It's childhood sexual abuse material.
Okay, never mind. Please answer the list.
Yeah.
Well, DDT hasn't distributed that.
He had a Discord server where they were taking photos of the minor in question, and they were using common AI tools, as well as explicitly referring to him in deeply sexualized manner.
Good point. It's pornographic, is it not?
It is.
It's a very good point. That's all of that can be very successly argued in court of law, saying this is a
CSAM.
technical definition.
It is literally CSAM. I was there. I think you were too. And
that's CP, guys.
Yeah, I saw and heard myself in front of Ochoa when the family was mentioning about what DDT did to them. I heard that footage myself on that court date, and I'm pretty sure you were there. It was very loud and clear amongst many other times. But the Discord server in particular was a group of them, all back and forth, making that sexually explicit material. Okay? In any other area, what happens?
Well, one could argue that ZDT didn't do that. One could argue that ZDT didn't do that. That was just people who are in his chat.
No,
he wasn't really.
No, he had,
obviously, he's described things pornographically.
Not only that, but he had a high-level supervisory role in that online platform.
Good point. Okay, interesting.
That's the problem.
So he could have moderated it for all intents and purposes.
Not only that, he was in it. He was in it. He was a participant.
Fire Truck says you're lying, but obviously we all know whose side Fire Truck is on.
That's another co-conspirator. I literally have documented proof of that person right there, literally harassing me on his part.
I don't think Oh, he's harassing you specifically.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've literally have
Cool.
several
I got some.
screenshots of that account. In any other situation, the following happens: you have an account takeover, and you immediately have these people be forced to turn over not only their accounts but their identities. It's very simple. It's actually very simple to identify exactly who each of these people are. The only thing that they have going for them right now is that you have an incredibly overwhelmed judicial system in LA, and you have a deeply corrupt county government with prosecutors going after people uh, that are critics of Scientology in any way, shape, or form, and of the government. That's the environment of LA. And so anywhere else, again, it's a very simple process. You have account takeovers. You have the account being suspended. You then have law enforcement go to whatever the platform is. They hand over all the information, like the firmware ID that was registered when the account was created. So what device did they register it from? The network information that they used to register that account with, what names, what other
Wow.
possible aliases you have
A lot of
that this
cross
person
reference.
have used. You cross and compare what the firmware ID is and these other metadata. It's very easy to find these people, okay, in a lawful manner. You don't need to do whatever shady detective work people think you need to do. It's very easy and simple. It happens all the time, frankly. It's how people that SWAT these major streamers like Kai Cenat or I Show Speed, all the times that they've been swatted, that's exactly how agencies like the FBI catch the people that commit bombings. It's very simple and routine. It's not anything special. Like, it's not magic either. Um, so yeah, that's my take on it.
Interesting. Yeah. So there's a lot more. Right. There's a lot more under the surface. Here's a question: how is ZT legally able to hide out in this medical facility? Do you think he's actually in a medical facility, and how long can he essentially stay there? And if he gets out, are like the police waiting outside the door once they have a date, or can he like go softly into the night?
No, they're gonna wait for him to turn himself in. I mean, that's what's gonna happen in my in
Lord, really?
yeah, they're gonna wait
That's a
for
shame.
yeah, they're gonna wait for him to turn himself in. This is a misdemeanor. In LA, he's likely gonna be offered some sort of
Still a misdemeanor.
he's likely gonna be offered some sort of mental health diversion program. It's likely what can happen. He might get maybe a year in jail. Um,
Okay. Well, it's not nothing.
it's not that it's not nothing, yeah, but the what it'll document is that basically the narrative will be derailed from the fact that there is a person who has for years done this to others, intimidated them into silence, and has no sort of co-conspirators that are involved with his activities, which is so blatantly easy to see that's just not the case. And again, I want to reiterate, it's really not magic. It's so easy to catch these, and it's routine. Anywhere else, where anybody else, it's so easy. Um, so that's my take. That's what I believe.
Toyota Story is asking Dodge, ask Henry why Scott defends DDT. Has DOA ever defended DDT? I
I
don't
have
know
no
if he
idea.
has, but
I have no idea. If he has,
they're more plugged in than I am.
yeah, if he has, honestly, that'd be very, which again,
Right.
it's a possibility given how egotistic.
Right. Who like who are the like? Why does ZDT have some of these hardcore fans? Do you think? Do you think? Oh yeah, that's what I want to ask you. The theory that ZDT is actually secretly working for Scientology. Do you feel that way? And if so, why? Why do you feel that would be the case?
Yeah, I do feel that way. First of all, he's self-admitted as being a Scientologist. Was in it for quite a number of years.
Well,
Um,
sure.
so that's red flag number one. Second of all, uh, the people he exclusively targets are entirely a roster of people that criticize Scientology. And third of all, the intended outcome is to suppress critics of Scientology in any way, shape, or form. So you take that combination, the reasoning logic is pretty compelling that he's carrying out their orders, regardless to the degree that you believe he may or may not be doing it. The intended outcome and the past and his uh, proclivities clearly show that to be more probable than anything else.
Interesting. And who like? Does anybody know about the whole like? Does anybody know how much he has profited from it? Is there any rough estimation, or do you have any rough estimation as to what he might have gotten in a year, or is there no way to really kind of figure that out?
Well, I know a bunch of people were tracking donations that were made through super chats and rumble chats.
Right.
And again, even those accounts are very easy to track. We know 86 GOP, whose face I've actually seen. I know how 86 GOP actually looks like. He doesn't look like that LinkedIn photo that was sent. I've literally
The Norm
seen.
Macdonald guy that
Yeah,
Scott presented.
no,
He doesn't look like
the
the Norm
name is
Macdonald LinkedIn guy now.
yeah, the name is correct. People have his name correct, but
David Comer, yeah.
yeah, he's a wealthy individual who has donated brickloads of money, and that's a fact. Um, but that's not the only supporter of his. And the other people that support him are a mix of people. You know, the internet is a crazy place. There's a lot of degenerate people out there that support degenerates like him. There's another
Sure.
guy who JD Delay was doing a sting on, who had a huge TikTok following, like 50, 60,000 followers on TikTok. Who, yeah, I mean, this guy was making over six figures a year.
That's wild. 95K one period, 3 years or 1 year? Interesting to bring it up onto you. So wow.
So there's money, and where there's money, there's motive.
That's more money than I've ever made from this. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Jealous.
Where there's money, there's motive, which shows intent.
Right.
And the best part about the internet,
I spent a week in jail for 95K.
I'm sure a lot of people would. A lot of people would.
I wouldn't do the other stuff though. I wouldn't ruin people's lives and get them fired and get custody removed from them. Call their occupations and say their mother is faking dying. And I wouldn't do any of that, but I would spend a week in jail.
And there's also the record of a lot of the people that do support him have. One guy in particular that was over at Kaiser back in November last year with the miner and Scott. They were by the sidewalk, and Sheep Show was there. And I actually have that clip. I have it posted on my channel. He was saying the most sexually explicit things about a child on video in the name of
Right.
Tony. And so, again, we're talking about a clear organization of people that specifically are targeting a child. And the only thing linking that child to them is the fact that that child criticized Scientology or document their activities. That's it. That's sufficient. That's quite literally how probable cause grounds work.
Yeah. Right.
So,
You can try to defend him and say it's free speech, but not when a person's under
No.
18. Not, and it doesn't matter that he turns 18 in this duration. All of it happened when he was under 18.
correct.
So I don't know anything about this. Toyota Stru, whatever. What does Henry think of Scott trying to sue Streets LA and La Poubelle? Is he still trying to do that? Seems like yesterday's weather.
You mean the lawsuit they won against her name?
Francois.
Yeah, is that what they mean?
Great Francois. Coster, sure.
If they mean what happened in that case, Streets' lawyer won against Francois. So they won
Right.
Dorothy won an anti-slap. The money was never
Right.
recovered though.
Right. Not fees.
Yeah,
No.
the money was never recovered because it turned out Francois is deeply in debt. And so Dorothy stopped trying to collect. But yeah, I don't know if that's what they're talking about. Francois Coster just has shitloads of line of credit that she's taken out in debt, has over-leveraged herself.
Interesting.
And
yeah, that's
Dorothy
pretty
did that,
much
by the way, for free.
right.
She's an
And she knew she wasn't going to get the cash back.
Absolutely, she did.
Actually.
Absolutely. She's
Right.
a killer lawyer. The fact that somebody like Dorothy out of the blue came up and represented Scott, represented Danny, and just took it on. I mean, what a legend. Like, Dorothy is a legend.
Yeah, I mean, she's anybody who's been on her side, she's been effective, and with Danny, she was very good. Leads you to ask, like, what are the court cases that you're watching? I guess at this point, there's only GOA and Aaron. Well, actually, the thing I wanted to ask you about was there any follow up with the Leah Remini intimidation of witnesses? There was a hearing a few months ago, and then with like the forced marriage thing, Scott, Gavin Potter, I believe Gavin Potter forced marriage thing. Do you know? Are there any updates with those two cases?
Yeah, the Gavin Potter case, I
You
believe
have to know.
they pushed off for needing, they called for several years to gather
Mediation, right. But they finally ruled that they can no longer mediate, as far as I
No,
know.
that was already ruled before. This was the case is set to be heard, so it can proceed forward. They defeated the usual stonewalls of mediation, and that part is all already done and over with. But they're talking about getting material witnesses and their testimony in a couple of years. And I know Aaron did a video about that. As far as the other one was which was the other one? So there's the Gavin Potter one. The other one was
The Leah Remini's lawsuit about like intimidation, obstruction of justice.
yeah, I believe that's still going forward, but her team was slapped hard with sanctions for using
Yes.
ChatGPT to write their shit. Honestly, like,
Yeah, what the fuck? So does she have shitty lawyers? Like, what the fuck is up with that? Like, is she choking on this?
I don't even think it's that. I think
ChatGPT is like, come on, dude.
I think it's a couple of things. I think first of all, Leah's not a serious person. Okay, first of all. Second of all, he's not a serious person. Anybody that truly expects Leah to bring to account and bring to justice anybody that committed crimes is you're delusional about it. She's not in it for whatever reasons people. Leah is just as much, in my opinion, of a complete degenerate as the people that are still to this day in the highest levels of Scientology. You don't get, first of all,
Really, that's a little harsh, but
my opinion is that Leah is really more interested in her own fame, in her own personal gain, rather than actually seeking justice. A lot of the narrative from Leah, from even her case, and as well as the show that she had a while back, was to not pay any lip service to the uh, child abuse that occurred in this criminal organization. So yeah, I mean that's why I say she's an idiot. She's not serious. This is a big, a big PR move for her, and good for her. I mean that's very typical of any A level celebrity, Hollywood. That's just how that entire industry works. But she's not serious. I mean she's just not serious. And a lot of people that are regular, people that are not involved in any of this, that's exactly how they see it. When situations like the egos break out. They just see it as um. So yeah, what it is. I think a lot of people don't appreciate that because it shatters their illusion and perception. I think we're in the perfect period of time, and especially now with the Epstein scandals that have been completely gone mainstream, people are done. I think a bigger percentage of people have their illusion shattered, and they have to reconcile the fact that what they thought was true, what they thought was real, is not, and that's a very bitter pill to swallow. So I think that's what it is for Leah.
yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with using your money and seeing what you could do, and maybe you could expose some corruption on their part and
Yeah,
some intimidation, and there's no harm in it.
correct. I agree with that.
But that's
Absolutely.
interesting, though, right? But it does. I mean, it is interesting. Here's the big thing. Do you think eventually? So we talked about the Gavin Potter suit. It was a milestone and a significant success to simply have the judge rule that there's been enough internal religious mediation. So for the judge to simply give the green light is a big deal. I don't know if you know or not, but well, first, yeah, do you know is that the next hearing? I don't think is for another year or perhaps 2 years. But do you think this could be something similar in terms of discovery or revelations once a trial really starts happening? Do you think it could be almost as significant as the Danny Masterson thing? Probably not because there's not celebrities involved, but do you think it might uncover some very damning information where this will be kind of the next big trial to focus on? Because I'm itching, man. I'm bored of Aaron and Scott vomiting on themselves. Let's actually cover something important. So yeah, tell me a little bit more about what you think about that.
No, I don't think their cases are really all that people believe they are. Leah's is on a personal level,
Bummer.
which I don't think people understand that, and it's not to
Right. I mean, it's going to be narrow if it's just about you as a complaint and things that happen to you. The discovery is very specific and probably not that relevant.
right, right. I think the most important part is actually, I think I told you this a while back, but I don't think uh, Aaron or Leah are going to be relevant in another year, frankly, because I think
Wow.
the most important relevance in all this is actually the look back window that Governor Newsom opened up for people that were sexually abused and moving forward with their cases. And I think all of their states, if people were actually serious about this cause, which again, I've made it very clear this is not my cause. I just cared about the government involvement things. But the people that are actually have skin in this game, if they're actually serious, what they would do is push for legislation and policies to open up similar look back windows in other states. That is the most important and most relevant thing. If you want to talk about how you can actually make a dent, I mean, California is a pretty messed up place, but to open up a look back window to prosecute sexual abuse cases is huge. I've not seen anybody that is with a big YouTube following that has big skin in this game talk about that. And that's the lens that I'm waiting to see who is going to pick up that mantle, because that will give a lot of good stuff to report on for people that want to report on it, because that's how you take on any criminal organization. What, especially most heinous crimes they commit, which is to violate somebody's body. That is huge. Newsom's look back window is huge. That is a topic worth covering for years. So anybody that's serious, that's what they would report on, and that would give a lot more content for people like that want to actually talk about stuff of significance. Because that is the narrative that has been missing out. When I take a look at other criminal enterprises like the Mormon Church, they do have that as part of the narrative against the Mormon religion, which is it's not of religion. It's a criminal ring where they're deliberately sexually abusing kids. And in Utah, there's been, I think, 91 cases of childhood sexual abuse filed against the church for that very same issue. And that's a serious movement and threat to the existence of that criminal enterprise. So that's why I say, that's what I mean when I say these people are not going to be relevant, because that's the real relevant topic next. Is look back windows and advocating for similar legislation in other states where there's a big concentration.
Well, I mean, Aaron can stay relevant by talking about those newest developments in that regard.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Talking about who,
If you so choose.
yeah, if you should so choose, talking about which House representatives in other states might have an open ear and be welcoming of those conversations, such legislation. That'd be great. People eat that up. I'm sure, especially for as many people as he knows within local government, I'm sure that would be something that they would love to talk to him about. Especially build up that local support where you pressure local officials, even if it's not just the city of Clearwater, but other areas. Clearwater is not the only city within the state of Florida. There's many other cities. And so to pressure those other local officials to push other state assembly people to introduce such legislation would be great. So that's the next frontier I see. In California, again, California has great laws. It lacks enforcement because of corruption, but the laws are pretty good, and the look back window is pretty extraordinary. Yeah, if they're serious, I hope they cover it.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, the other thing I want to ask you about, what do you think the numbers are sort of diminishing for everybody talking against Scientology? Was Danny Masterson the big anchor for that until things kind of continue? Will you see kind of do you think there's a real diminishing of numbers? Also want to shout out Brown T for saying hi, kicking it with her. She had very sweet comments, so hello to her. But yeah, so do you think, yeah, I mean, do you think that numbers are falling apart and diminishing? And will another trial reignite that, or do you think it's like on a decline?
Well, that's just it. If awareness is the lowest tier, right, where you make people aware of an issue. If you are actually serious about a cause, you have to figure out how to work in a larger collective to make long-lasting institutional change, which is the boring, non-sexy part. That's the stuff that involves heavy lobbying for policies and laws, which involves organizing with local community organizations that do this type of push for state laws, which involves going to make public comment, which involves writing letters to officials. That's the type of stuff that is not so sexy, and most people just rely on the internet buzz. And I think what people like Will do particularly well, and probably the only thing I really think he does quite extraordinarily well, and the only thing he lays claim to doing well, is building a pathway for people that want to use that initial awareness and troll-like content to, if they actually care enough and are serious about it, make some sort of better organized environment to do whatever long-lasting is. A perfect example of that is the Brown Act in California. The House Assembly member, Ralph Brown, who made that act, was decades ago. He did a bunch of other stuff, but really, the Brown Act still lives on to this day. And the Brown Act to have in other states would be fantastic because it mandates that every local public hearing has to take public comment. And that is a great way to start having in other cities where people are in, to have people come forward and make a public comment about how they've been victimized and how government officials are tied to this entire criminal ring. That's a very, it might seem boring, but that's stuff that actually makes a difference. And sometimes, it might take a good personality to figure out how to make that content sexy. But yeah, that's the next step with anything. That's the next step with any cause that people actually care about. And for most people, they are not willing or able to for a wide variety of reasons. So that's always the hardest part.
What? Yeah, shout out to Crackhead Kenny, by the way. I want to shout out to him. What are some actionable steps that one could take with the whole Stacy Moxon situation? I guess you're working on some of that now. But what can they post about? Can they post the files? Do you want to publicly release them? What's that next step?
Yeah, so I posted the links to the files on all over my social media. I've tagged different people. I've actually written to prosecutors, and I've gotten replies back. And I've urged them, I've done my part. We need to investigate and open up a case on this. Other people like Laura and Nora, I think, need to also go and file a formal complaint and to prosecutors and come forward with any other information. Similarly, the Headleys, they need to go and talk to prosecutors, not cops. Okay, because cops, they can do whatever enforcement work afterwards, but prosecutors are ultimately the ones that file charges. So go talk to the DA, go talk to the U.S. Attorney, put up their contact information, and share with them anything you have. And if they want to talk to the FBI, frankly, I don't think the FBI field office in LA is any good. Go to another field office away from LA, and they will talk to you. And I know that because I've talked to them. And so that's an actual act that people, and especially those people amongst others, firsthand.
I'm curious. Do you think the protesters that are doing it right, that should be followed while we're here? Like I would suggest LA or Down Under, Scientology Down Under, or Miriam from Denmark. I can't believe I'm blanking on the name. It has an alien icon. And yeah, so I don't know, any protesters that you look up to or follow that are not DOA and Aaron necessarily.
Yeah, I honestly, I have just followed Audit LA. I think Audit is the gold standard,
Oh, yeah.
and if just repeat what Audit does, like is literally the simplest thing I could give. Just if you actually care and if this cause is something that interests you, do that. Just copy what Audit does in your local area. And Audit,
Kansas City Scientology audit, too, by the way, just to throw another one out there, kind of protests intelligently. Kansas City Scientology audit.
yeah, anytime, it's the same basic tactics, right? You go to public hearings, state your piece. Then the other parts of it are people that do some of the more boring stuff like file for public records. Then other people again need to organize to make it a bigger movement and advocate for very specific laws and policies. And all that takes quite a bit of effort, organization. And so, if people were actually serious though and they wanted to learn how to do that, Audit LA and some of the other people that you might, I don't know them, I know Audit LA in particular does a fantastic job of showing you how to, and so it's just replicating that in S.
Cool. Speaking of a voice under, which you should all subscribe, I just mentioned her out in Perth, working on rolling out the inquiry of all states under here. How many states does Australia have? Like 6? It's much more manageable. It's kind of like Canada, where it's a lot less divided states. But yeah, so that's good. So she's working on that down. I mean, that's the thing. You have to look at Canada and Australia, I think, as well as other places that have had significant bases, as well as Mexico. But yeah, here's a fun one. Do you think Scientology will ever be taken down formally? Do you think 5 years down the road, do you think we'll ever see David Miscavige be arrested? Or is that just wishful thinking? If you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. I think
Maybe you cannot hear me.
No, I can hear you. Honestly, at least from the American side, more and more people, especially when you take a look at Gen Z, they don't give a shit about religion. In fact, they deeply despise how criminal that religious institutions are. I think overall, religion in America, in particular, is having a whole day of reckoning on how it'll look like. And I think we're living in a period that it's possible that we could see laws and policy really smacking around the institutions of religion and either limiting them on what sort of investments and avenues that they can put money into, and limiting the people that can hold offices that have ties to religious institutions. And so that is very real. And I think it's really funny. As somebody that wasn't born in the States, I have a perspective that people who are not insiders to the U.S., which is that a lot of people, especially in developed countries in Europe, do not care much for religion. They in fact see it as one of the common biggest contributors to corruption and criminal dealings, and therefore ban it. Germany is a great fucking example. Germany's a really good fucking example. They do not care for it, and in fact they ban anybody that has any involvement with Scientology from ever holding any sort of government official position, and they do a thorough check to make sure that you don't fucking have any of it. And so that's a great thing. I think America is having that day of reckoning right now, and I think for overall religious ban the shit, and that's a great place to be. And it's just building up, just like we had the civil rights movements, that same type of very unified front. But for this next chapter in America is very important to have. And I think the best time to do it is now, frankly, because of how deeply fascistic the U.S. has gotten and how many people have lost faith in those institutions. And to come out on top as somebody who does not have and advertise yourself as somebody who have that deep level of corruption and ties to all that, you're positioning yourself to be in such a good place because it's so easy to stand out. The bar is very low for standing out.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. Toyota Drew says, do you think the LAPD are getting tired of protecting Scientology? I mean, I'd imagine no, because they get off-time money.
No,
so if you get money, you don't get tired.
They are, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I've literally I've gotten told repeatedly at City Hall, okay? Downtown LAPD thanks you for your work. Literally several times.
They probably feel like it's too much of a headache to have to deal with. Other people like you looking over their shoulder and trying to take it to task every moment, and it's just not worth the hassle.
It's not even just a Scientology thing. You got to understand, okay? For them, their money is dedicated and completely locked to the city. The city is broke as shit right now for LA, and their pension is entirely on the budget that the city has. So if the city's broke, and it's because these assholes are from the city council and these other departments are burning money to bribe, other officials to protecting this criminal racket, then that cuts into how much they can get when they inevitably retire, and they do not want to take that risk. Their pensions are on the line, their retirement is on the line, they have their kids to think about, and so to them it's like they don't care for any of this shit because it's only going to end up worse for them, and they're only going to be used as lapdogs. Okay, it was only beneficial for the short run, and as they're seeing that people clearly have a vested interest in this, they're like, oh shit, this is not worth my post license, this is not worth my retirement. You know, that's just how it works. That's the way that cops think. And so I've gotten so many times, and I'm telling you, they'll come up to audit, they'll come up to me, and they'll constantly tell us. Okay, even if you don't see it on camera, they tell us 100% of the time. We appreciate the work you guys are doing. You know, this station thanks you. Downtown especially thanks you. And that's why they don't give us any grief when we're in those halls. You know, they let all the shit slide, and they will
Yeah.
continue to let it all
And
slide.
they seem to have like a friendly basis in some regard. They're not like the ICE agents or anything.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly how it is. They hate what is going on in their city. But they're just tools at the end of the day. They really are just tools being used. And that's not their fault. I mean, you can even see it a lot of people don't understand this because it's not as sexy, but for example, when you make public comment, the cops are the only ones that can actually kick you out of a room. They do not take orders on when to kick people out of the room if they're making particular
Oh,
comments.
I know that.
You know, the president can issue that they're out of order, but that doesn't mean shit. The sergeant at arms ultimately has the full legal authority to say, yeah, they're disruptive, kick them out, or to say, no, like your order is stupid, what you're doing is stupid, you're trying to get me involved in it, I'm not going to take any of that shit. So that they don't like being put in that position, and they say it all the time. Graciano, Duarte, all of them say that all the time. They don't care for any of it. They just want to have a peace fuckery. That's how the cops think.
So that's good. It's not as an uphill battle as you think. Do you think Aaron and DOE's behavior turns off any potential protesters, or do you think it's largely self-sustaining? You know, there are people like you really doing, following through the legal maneuvers, and that's the most important part.
Honestly, I don't think people care.
Yeah,
I don't.
depressing.
I really don't think people care. I mean, I've seen countless other TikToks of people that are
Are they?
in their
Or
younger.
really can't. That's the point.
Yeah, they're in their 20s that are doing a lot of this reporting work on getting like six-figure levels of. That's great. Like,
Right.
that's fantastic. So I really don't think people. I really think the vast majority of people do not tune in. I don't even think they know who some of these characters are. To be honest. Aaron, yes, because some of these other characters I really don't even know. And even if they did know who they are, they would. I don't think.
No, there's an inflated sense of ego and self-importance, right? And where, DOA really only has about 10,000 subscribers collectively, and Aaron has a lot more. But then you look at his views of his lives and some of the videos, and they're not like that dissimilar to my views. They're maybe like my views, maybe 1/4 or 1/5 of the views he gets, and he has 10 times or 20 times the amount of subscribers I have. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I wonder if that was built-in subscribers in the Masterson case, perhaps 80%, 90% of whom don't regularly tune into him.
Yeah, they don't, and I'm glad that they have the subscribers. You know, again, multiple things can be true at the same time. So clearly, there's interest. All that shows is there's some interest in the topic, but it doesn't mean that those particular people will continue to be relevant, or that people particularly find them interesting, just in the topic at large. And yeah, that's just how things go. It's like adapt or die. And most people want to see more of how the game is played and how Scientology and the other criminal organizations are tied to each other. But what most people want to see, that's where they're hooked on. There's a lot of people that clearly have shown that interest in. I think different people, different personalities can address some of the. At the end of the day, if people really want to make a long, single change for this cause, like I said, yeah, that's the part that is not as sexy, a lot harder to do. Because at the end of the day, you got to think about it this way, right? Say Aaron is no longer around. Would the change and would the advocacy live on and exist as fiery? And would that change still be around and seen 5 years down the road? And if the answer is no, and if it lives and dies with them, then that's not a successful. That's not a successful outcome. You can't have it tied to one persona or personality. That's not how a long-standing change. And that's how people like Ralph Brown with the Brown Act, the simple, non-sexy stuff. That's the stuff that has real meaning, real impact. It's also the harder stuff.
Yeah, so it's a lot. It's like step-by-step, slow process, and that's the only way you do it. It's not sensational. It's not, it's not going to come all at once. It's about consistency. And I admire you, man, because you've actually done behind-the-scenes shit that isn't really about the glory or the clicks, that really exposed some information that could actually be followed through with, and that could result in dismissals of officers or arrests or a lot of other things, or lawsuits quite easily. So I appreciate that. I might wind down. I got to walk my dog. I think we've been chatting for about an hour 45. Yeah, I felt that I had a van fire truck. When you start calling people anti-Semitic and stuff, don't call people personal names, but don't call people extreme personal names like that. So it was one of the rare occasions I've had to time out somebody. But say Levi. And anything else that you want to add? I think you gave a lot of people some good instructions and found out some pretty real stuff. But
yeah, strategy. Just like any military general, if you want to be successful, you need to have strategy, and that goes for any cause, including this one. So if you have no strategy, then you're dead in water. And strategy is, I think, from what little time I spent in this cause, I think is gravely lacking. And I hope the people that actually care enough to continue forward get serious thought, because it's giving me a lot of insight in other causes that I do personally care about that I will be taking on in the future on how to make sure I do it the right way with proper strategy to make sure that there's a long-term sustainable change even after I'm way long strategy.
Well, hopefully I know you've been thinking out loud about becoming a lawyer, so I hope you do that.
Yeah,
You
you
know, a
can
lot of
think it's
people
not
do
real.
that.
Yeah, you can actually right now if you go to the
Really? Oh, I can tell you it's real.
yeah, anybody can believe you can literally talk to LSEC and they'll see that
Dude, you crashed with me for a few nights at some law schools, so you know when you're to visit a
yeah,
bunch of law
it's
schools, I can
people are
vouch for that.
wild, man, wild shit.
Yeah, it's kind of the fun of it. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. It's hard not to laugh about it. Some people get really hurt by it. And I'd say that you can't handle the game, but you can handle the game, I think, pretty well. Just,
Yeah, it is
you know,
pretty
you know
basic.
the
Yeah, sometimes
characters. People like to make fun of your background.
yep.
That's why, like early on, I was like, "Sweet." We might be very disconnected. I was asking, were there any streams that you have coming up?
Was there any what?
Any streams that anybody should be watching out that you might be doing in the next week or so?
I was gonna do a more technical, involved review of the files I've seen, and
Great.
explaining the suit. And so again, it's probably not gonna be as sexy, but I think
I
that's
want
great.
to watch that though.
And
Well,
yeah,
let me know when you think you might do it.
I'll probably do it in the next coming weekend. And basically, I'll talk about the response they gave and going over some of the files and some of my own take on discovered and all that stuff. I'll put that up. And yeah, the other thing to keep in mind that I wanted to do a quick video on too is over in Riverside County, there's another deputy that was involved and actually convicted of a giant sexual extortion ring. He was a deputy overseeing.
Jesus,
Yeah,
really?
Christian Heidecker, Heidecker. Christian Heidecker was recently, just this year, convicted of a giant sexual extortion. He was a deputy overseeing the county jail, and he was brutally assaulting various female inmates. And in that process, those inmates ended up coming forward, and also it was discovered that the Riverside County Sheriff's Department was also trying to bribe those inmates from coming forward about Christian sexual assault of them. So that's Riverside County, and it's a small like hole in the wall area that people don't really think much about, but a lot of really fucked up shit that happens because it's so small and isolated. And yeah, the giant sexual extortion ring where a guy
Wow.
overseeing inmates was brutally sexually abusing them, and the department was bribing the women to their mouths shut.
Scary. Well, it's a lot to uncover. All right, so if you want to subscribe, you got 150 watching, almost 200 consistently. What is your YouTube?
Yeah, the biggest one you can go to is Film the Government, and you can see all my other channels from it. Film the Government is probably the easiest.
Awesome. All right, well, let's do this again soon. Once you have the post, the deep dive into the documents, maybe we'll have we'll digest it.